Everyone, welcome back to Katie's Favorite Recipes. Today I've got 3 great sheet pan meals for you all. These are perfect for busy weeknights, for hot summer days, or just any time in general. They're perfect for meal prep. The first one is chicken fajita. The second one is Parmesan crusted chicken and potatoes. And the third one is garlic butter chicken, potatoes, and broccoli. These recipes are full of flavor and I think you guys are going to love them. So let's go ahead and get started with the chicken fajitas right now. So for this recipe, I'm going to start off cutting up my vegetables. That's usually what I always do in my recipes, but I am going to do 2 small onions, and I'm just going to chop these up into slices, but not necessarily bite-sized pieces, just a little bit bigger. So for this recipe, I will type everything as I always do in the description down below, but we're going to go over it together. So after I finish chopping up all of my onions and getting them into the sizes that I like, I'm going to move on to my broccoli. This is optional. I mean, of course, any of it is. If you don't like any of this, you can substitute it out or do whatever. But I really like broccoli in fajitas. It is super good. So I did about a head of broccoli or so, and I'm just chopping these up into bite-sized pieces. I'm cutting off the big stems so I don't have a big hard stem in there. And I'm just going to finish up that, and once we get that to the size we like, we're going to next move on and we're going to do 1 green bell pepper. If you want red, you can add red, or you can even do, multiple peppers if you want to do that, but I only do 1. So this is the easiest way I have found to cut a bell pepper, is to just cut around the core. And it's a whole lot better instead of cutting through the core and making the seeds explode everywhere and having to scrape all that off. So we're just going to do that, and I just cut mine down into really skinny strips, and then I'll cut those down into about bite-sized pieces. I'm just trying to make everything kind of uniform on the size and get it all, kind of matching. So if you like yours longer or thicker, you can do that, however you want to do it. But we're just going to finish chopping that up, and then next we're going to move on after this to our chicken. And you just seen me, I just ate a piece of bell pepper. But anyways, we're going to chop those up to the size we like, and we're going to move on to our chicken. And really I got breast tenderloins just because they're already smaller and you don't have to cut as much. And then I'm just going to cut them down into chunks. Some people do strips, some people, cut them down into really small chunks, but I just like mine into about bite-sized pieces. So once I get all of those down to the size I like and get them all sliced and cleaned up really good, I'm going to move these out of the way, and then I'm going to start on my seasonings. So for this recipe, you can use, if you want, a fajita packet in the seasonings, or even taco seasoning would be good on this, but I just wanted to do my own seasonings. So I did 1 tablespoon of chili powder, 2 teaspoons of oregano, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. You can use regular if you want, but the smoked gives it a good smoky flavor, I think. I did 1 teaspoon of cumin, and then I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of onion powder, and then half a teaspoon of pepper. And then once I finish that up, we're just going to mix this up really well. That way it will make it easier to get everything evenly coated onto, all the vegetables and the chicken and everything. So I did some also sliced mushrooms in this recipe, and I just got a package of sliced mushrooms and just dumped them in there after I washed them, of course. And then we're just going to put everything into a bowl so that way we can coat it with olive oil. I did about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. That way, it acts as a good binding agent, and all these flavors are going to stick to it really well. And then we're just going to dump this onto our sheet pan. I did not spray my sheet pan, and I didn't have a problem with this stuff sticking, but I did line it with Reynolds wrap, as you can see, so it would make it easier for cleanup. But we just want to give everything a good mix to make sure that the olive oil is coated on everything evenly, so all of the seasonings will stick well onto it. So after we do that, we're going to pour our seasonings on top of this, and then we're going to mix it all up again. You can toss this all in a bowl if you'd rather do it that way, but I just sprinkled it on there and mixed it up with tongs right on the sheet pan. And we're going to make sure that everything is really well encoded. And then I'm going to go over everything with Kinder's Fajita blend. You do not have to do that, that's optional. And then we're going to pop this in the oven at 400 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. I topped mine with cheese, and this was so good. It was full of flavor. We loved it. So now we're going to move on to the Parmesan crusted chicken and potatoes. For this recipe, I did 2 bags of the yellow potatoes, and I just washed those super good, and I'm just chopping these into little bite-sized pieces. If you want to leave them as wedges, you can do that, but you know, it might take just a little bit longer to cook them down. So once I finish chopping all those up, I'm going to move them to a bowl, and I'm going to pour about 4 tablespoons of olive oil on these. And then we're just going to mix that up really good. That way, whenever I do my Parmesan and garlic and all that on them, it's going to stick and coat them really well. And I just used 2 wooden spoons and stirred this up, but if you want to just toss the bowl and kind of do it that way, you probably could if your bowl was big enough. And then I'm going to go in with 4 tablespoons of grated Parmesan. And after I do that, I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. And then I'm just going to salt and pepper this to taste. The good thing about salt and pepper to taste is that if you don't get enough, you can go back and add more. But everybody's salt preferences can be a little bit different. So that's why I just say to taste on some of this stuff. So we're just going to finish that up, and then we are going to give everything a good stir. I just used my wooden spoons again, and I just stir this around really well. And once it all looks like that it's getting good and coated, you can go ahead and transfer this over to your sheet pan. And I did mine covered in Reynolds wrap, and if you want to spray this before, that would be great, because I didn't, and mine stuck just a little bit, but it wasn't a big deal. And go ahead and pop those in the oven, 425 degrees. And then we're going to start on our chicken. And I used about 1.5 pounds of chicken breast tenderloins. And then I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of olive oil and coat those with that. And then I will do a 1/3 cup of grated Parmesan, a 1/3 cup of Italian breadcrumbs, 2 minced garlic cloves, and then I'm going to do 1/2 teaspoon of pepper and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And we're going to mix that really well and make sure that, you know, the garlic is kind of busted up and it's not clumped up and stuck together. And we're just going to stir that around. And then once we get this finished up stirred, we are either going to individually coat our chicken, or we're just going to pour the whole thing over top of our chicken and stir it around like we did with the potatoes. Now, I started to coat mine individually, and I was like, you know, this is kind of taking a little bit longer than I want it to, so I'm just going to dump it over top of the rest of my chicken. But I did a lot of potatoes, and all of this couldn't fit on one sheet pan, and I went ahead and started my potatoes in the oven. That way they would be good and crispy by the time the chicken was done. So I just did it that way on 2 separate sheets. But if you can fit it all on one, then do that. But I'm just going to stir up my chicken, and then after I make sure that I've stirred it up, I'm going to put it on my sheet pan. And there is going to be some stuff left down in the bottom of your bowl, so I went ahead and poured that on there on top of my chicken, and then I just patted it with a fork to make sure it kind of got stuck to the chicken a little bit more, instead of just dumping it and letting it go wherever. And then once we finish doing that, we're just going to put this in the oven as well. And we are just going to let it all bake for about 20 to 25 minutes. I did flip my potatoes over halfway through to make sure that the bottoms didn't get too crispy, but they got crispy enough, you know, they didn't burn. But here is everything. This meal was so good, and it was so simple. I paired it with green beans, and I think you all are going to love this. Perfect meal for a weeknight. So now we're going to move on to our final recipe, which was the garlic butter chicken broccoli and potatoes. So I am going to be using about 6 medium potatoes, and I just peeled those and washed them. And then I'm just going to dice these up. If you want to use the little yellow potatoes again, you can do that as well. But I'm using regular potatoes for this. And then I'm just going to cut them up into chunks. You know, if you wanted to leave them into little strips or wedges, you could do that. However you want to cut them, it really don't matter. You just need to make sure, however you cut them, that they just cook, you know, until you are happy with the tenderness of them. And I like my potatoes to be crispy. So, you know, really if you wanted to start these after you finish them and then add everything else to the pan after, that would be fine too. But I'm going to go ahead and chop up my broccoli. I did about 2 heads of broccoli. And we're just going to cut those off the stems and cut the big stems off. I don't like the stems very well, so I always just cut the big pieces off. And then I've cleaned up my chicken. I'm using about 1/2 pound to 2 pounds of chicken. Got the breast tenderloins, so I didn't have to do a whole lot to it. I just left it the way it was. And then I melted about a stick of butter, and then I am going to do 4 minced garlic cloves into that, a tablespoon of parsley, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And my oven is preheating at 400 degrees, by the way. And I'm just going to mix that up really well. And 1 stick of butter is equivalent to about 1/2 cup of butter. So if you're using, you know, other than a stick, that's how much you'll need. But I greased my pan and I lined it with Reynolds wrap, of course. And I'm just going to put all of this on there and make sure that the potatoes are not laying on top of each other. And I'm just going to start drizzling this butter mixture over top of everything. And spreading it out evenly onto the pan. And also the juice is going to run under all of this and melt all through the whole pan. It's not just going to be on the top. But I'm going to stir these up individually and make sure that everything is coated well. So we're going to go in and stir all the potatoes and then all of the broccoli and all of the chicken. And also on my broccoli, I went over it with original Mrs. Dash seasoning. You don't have to do that. It was just an extra flavor that I wanted to add. So I did that. And then we are going to pop this in the oven at 400 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes. And I ended up putting my potatoes back in under the broiler and letting them get a little bit crispier. I think you guys are going to love these recipes, so like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Bye!